Alright, today we only have one thing that showed up. It's not in a box because I wasn't quite sure what this was, and that's because the Amazon order finally got canceled and I ordered it from, I think, another vendor. And I do believe the reason I really want this is because I think Season 4 was Blu-ray only, but this limited edition also includes the DVD version. Which, you know, may be weird, but that's what I do. Hold on. The back here says this is Region A only. It looks like that says there's an English dub there. Well, here's the fourth plate. This is Food Wars, the fourth plate limited edition. I can definitely feel that there's more stuff separating here than I should have thought. Okay, there we go. That can come off, and then there's a separate top here. Oh, there we go. Some familiar characters, some new characters that I don't recognize. I think I tended not to purchase the limited editions for this because they tend to come out late. Okay. This appears to be the DVD and the Blu-ray probably. And here's the DVD version. She's a little scantily clad. Rebels vs. Central. It's interesting because I don't remember it being like that. This one's only 2 discs, and that may be consistent with what came out before. Okay, she's in a more compromised position. Wait, I guess I'm kind of curious. No, it says Rebels vs. Central there as well. So no, I guess. And then scooting over here, we have these, and they will probably go right back in here. This looks like this is made in China, but I think there's a stand there, and this looks like one of those things I could set up. It's tempting, but at the same time, if I don't, then it stays in here and gives this limited edition its own sense of completeness. Okay, next up we've got a bear pin. Is that a bear? That's not a bear tail. I guess it's kind of a cat. It looks okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it. It looks more like a cat. Interesting. And then last but not least, we have bookmark. Hold on. This looks lenticular, but I'm not getting any different sides. So that's an interesting bookmark. Now we can fix this because this was put in here without that little thing sticking up. Well, I think that's everything that's in here, but it's kind of neat. There we go. Close it like that. Put this on here. Here's this week's anime DVD collection update. Alright, let's see. I've got a lot to talk about here. So Miss Vampire, Who Lives in My Neighborhood. I think last week I had watched maybe the first 2 episodes. Maybe just the first episode. Well, I watched up to episode 3, and it's amusing. Although I'm not finding it's super engaging, so it's become a lower priority to continue watching it. I may or may not watch more, but I was at least curious up to that 3rd episode. I can't say that the title of the next episode is making me super curious about it, but you know, it's not necessarily bad. I guess it's just worth noting that it wasn't very engaging, and there were definitely more interesting things kind of grabbing my attention, and I kind of mentioned one of those last week, and that's a Jobless Reincarnation. I had mentioned that I tried to look for it on Crunchyroll before, didn't find it, assumed okay, I guess it got licensed, and now it's there again. And I do believe it's back because the episodes say that they were added on March 1st, and I'm guessing that's when a bunch of Funimation stuff is being dumped back on there, and it also explains why some of them look like they've probably been around. They've got comments like they've existed for years or something like that. But it's there now. I got a chance to watch it, and I think I mentioned there was the dilemma of whether or not I was going to watch it dubbed or subbed, because dubbed is easier for me to have on in the background, but subtitled would allow me to watch all 2 seasons, and the dub didn't go through both seasons, at least what was available so far. So I went subtitled, and I watched all of it, and I think it's seasons 1 and 2. Maybe it's just core 1 and 2 of season 1. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty good show. It kind of reminds me a lot of Re:Zero in certain ways. Not like in its execution per se, but rather I thought there were similar things. There's maybe similar issues with them, and if you've watched Re:Zero, you kind of know that some of the issues with Re:Zero don't necessarily make it unwatchable, and maybe some of them are more pronounced in Jobless Reincarnation. But I thought on the flip side, Jobless Reincarnation feels like it is themed better, or something like that, where I kind of favorably compared it to Neon Genesis Evangelion in terms of they're really trying to hit upon a human condition that's actually a central theme to the show. So like Neon Genesis Evangelion, it really is about the hedgehog's dilemma. And in Evangelion, this is kind of explained as the fact that, the hedgehog wants to cuddle with other hedgehogs, but their spines hurt each other, so they don't want to interact. And this is supposed to be a description of actually the human experience, in that, we kind of are social animals and we want to socialize, but we hurt each other, and kind of some of our eccentricities or unusualness comes from this hurting of each other and how we deal with that. And that's kind of, it's talked about explicitly in one episode of Evangelion, but when you get down to it, that's kind of the theme of the whole series. And Jobless Reincarnation is a little less subtle about that, but it's still on point, where the entire point, its name, it basically refers to the fact that our main character is a shut-in. He suffered from a very socially humiliating experience in high school, and he just won't leave his room anymore. And if you're super well adjusted, you may kind of say, yeah, he needs to get over it or something like that, even though we know it would be hard for him. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes some people don't or won't or can't or something like that. And I don't think we're supposed to go in there questioning the logistics about it so much as understanding that's just what he's having to deal with. And it's an isekai, and this is one of the things that makes it better than Re:Zero, because Re:Zero definitely tried to bring kind of self-loathing as a theme, but as I said, one of the problems with that show is that we are subject to our main character's internal thoughts, and I can't remember his name right now. In fact, I think I can only remember Betty's name right now, and I'm trying to remember what that's even a full of. It's not Bartholomew, that's Bartholomew. So, definitely a little brain farty there. But the entire point, getting away from that discretion, is that Re:Zero wanted to set that stuff up, and one of Re:Zero's weaknesses, I felt, was that the characters were a little more convenient for the plot. Not necessarily changing them too radically, but still kind of changing them as it needed to kind of try to play with these things. Whereas I'd say Jobless Reincarnation did a better job of keeping the theming right. And I think on the flip side, I'd say Re:Zero does a better job of kind of giving you this kind of fanciful notion of what needs to be happening, even though there's kind of a meandery in the present to it, where maybe it's not immediately obvious what the main character can or should be doing, and there's some stuff. It feels like there's more direction there than there is in Jobless. And that's kind of weird, I know, if you watch Jobless, because you're like, oh yes, he's always got a goal, but it's like, that's the thing, is Jobless Reincarnation is very much more he's living in the moment sort of anime. He's got an immediate goal, but they kind of do change those goals as things change. And so it feels maybe a little more realistic, real-lifey that way. It's hard to say if as a story it's great, and maybe it's set something up that it's trying to do, but it's not finished story-wise. Now, it might be finished as an anime, you never know, because a lot of these series never finish themselves. But for the most part, it's interesting how there's some trade-offs there between those two series. But the main thing that they both have in common, as far as I can tell, is people that really fucking piss me off that the show wants us to say, yeah, and now everything's hunky-dory. Now, to give Jobless Reincarnation some credit, it actually has to deal with those people, whereas ReZero allows them to reset and cheat the system, basically. But at the same time, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of funny that both of them made me very angry at people. But overall, you know, it was a good show. The next one's interesting because it's Ari Fureta from Commonplace to World Class. And it's interesting because it's a very flawed show, but it still works out despite some of these flaws. And I think some of those are that, so shows that kind of tend to mess up this, it's another isekai, of course, and it kind of has a very, I wouldn't call the beginning great, per se, because it's more fragmented than I feel it really needed to be. I can understand some of what it wants, and unlike Reincarnated as a Spider, it felt like the side view with the other classmates didn't have as much meaning to it, I guess. Like, it didn't, it felt like with Spider, you watch those and you kind of realize they're building to something. And I don't know if I got that same feeling here. But despite all that, even though it does some really weird things with its characters, and it's kind of just like, well, yeah, there we go, this person is now part of that group. It, again, still somehow works. And I think part of that is it doesn't treat the story as completely straightforward, stupid. Like, oversimplified, I guess, is maybe the better word I'm trying to aim at. You know, headache, it's really hard to think of the right terms. Like, there was that one I was watching where a person dodged and said, aha, the very clever move, trying to hit me with a big blast of fireball. I'm like, that's about as smart as saying, you found my one weakness, point blank total annihilation. It's, or you found my one weakness, being murdered. That one didn't feel completely thought out in terms of what it was doing, and while this one didn't, like, feel like it was just well constructed overall, it at least felt like it was thoughtful enough not to make little mistakes like that. And at the same time, it's actually pretty eager to show off its characters in a way that at least makes them entertaining and fun to watch, even though it's a little strange. Our main character's attitude is somewhere along an interesting path, even though it's hard to tell how realistic it actually feels. But because they're having fun making the show and showing the character off, it works out. It's interesting. I don't know if I was going to say anything else about that. Let's see. That gets me up to, with my Friday friend, you know, we didn't watch a whole lot of anime because we ended up playing a couple games of StarCraft. Nothing too spectacular. Basically, me, my Friday friend, and our additional friend who joins us for some of these Fridays, but he's not a big anime watcher, you know, we just simply play comp stomps. I mean, I barely have the focus to think about anything else. And along those lines, I use the same strategy I used a billion years ago, and they kind of play around it. Like, one of them, the one that doesn't normally watch anime with us, he goes with a varied strategy. So he plays Protoss, comes up with a variety of units. He has fun that way. That's nice and good. The Friday friend who watches anime, if he were to also play Protoss, he'd be doing the same strategy I would. So he instead plays Zerg and tries a different strategy, which is to kind of run early game interference. And then I use a pretty standard carrier rush. Like, I don't know that I necessarily think about it too hard. I've got better timing now than I did when we last played a couple of months ago. But, you know, carrier rush is kind of just a useful... It makes sure the game's going to get ended. And, you know, I don't think it's necessarily anything exciting to write home about, but it was an interesting thought. But then we moved on to anime, because with me having Crunchyroll subscription and exploring stuff, my Friday friend is actually interested in exploring series that haven't come out on DVD Blu-ray yet, and he wants to catch up on. And one of those was Attack on Titan. But the problem is there's only subtitled episodes on there, and we've watched over 60, 70 episodes dubbed, so that would make it kind of weird to watch, and so I'm kind of pushing back a little bit on that, because I'm not so curious that I'm like, I have to watch this before I get the dubbed characters, which I'm used to. So instead, we watched a couple episodes of Reincarnated as a Slime, and I'm not quite sure what all... It was on Crunchyroll, but what I ended up watching was Season 1, Episode 24.9, which is a basic recap episode of the entire first season. Perfectly fine, good refresher. And then we watched the first 2 episodes of Season 2. I think they're Season 2. They were labeled as Season 1, Episodes 25 and 26. But, you know, we were at least starting to get in there. Right now, it's hard to say that there's anything that jumped out to me right now as... oh, this is super awesome. You know, one at least little awesome moment near the beginning, which is good. You know, they need to feed us those breadcrumbs to lead to wherever it's planning to go. And I have speculation on that sort of stuff, but I don't know that I necessarily want to speak about that in detail, just in case other people want to watch it, come to their own conclusions, etc. And maybe it gets answered in Season 2 and I'm completely wrong. But, you know, making some progress there. Next up, the Saint's magic power is omnipotent. And that was a very nice show. First off, it is an isekai, but this one's an isekai that's another shoujo reverse harem show. And it's interesting because if you like, compared to Life as a Villainess is fun. You got a very fun main character, but it's definitely one that plays upon her being kind of this wonderful, immature, but kind-hearted person. Maybe like a female version of Luffy from One Piece. You know, I think there's kind of the same sort of energy there, where there's a powerful innocence to them that's leading people. And there's a youthful naivete that, you know, tends to be a part of that. And, let's see, Saint's magic power seems to be instead approaching it from a different angle, where our main heroine is basically a Japanese office worker. So I think she's still kind of youngish. I don't know how youngish. My guess would be somewhere in the 20s. They may have said the name, but I don't really know. But the point is, she's got a more mature mindset, and this show is definitely trying to be one where a more plain every woman is getting swept off her feet. And I think the tropes are still more along the lines of shoujo as opposed to josei, but it's an interesting, refreshing approach. It also means that maybe she doesn't stand out too much as a character. She's a little more replaceable, but I also feel like they're not like Mary suing her per se. Like, she's defined to be in there in order to have the rules broken in the rules defined by that universe, and it does feel like there is meaning to what they're doing when they're introducing that stuff. And it's fun. It doesn't feel like it has a definitive end, which is one of its weaknesses, or definitive end goal, but it still gives you reason to want to watch excuse me, episode per episode, I feel. And it isn't just, oh, here's another pretty boy, everybody in the audience say, oh, how sweet, we don't have to have any story. It seems to still progress. I'm not sure if it ended in a way that's ending, but it did end at a place where if they didn't go anymore, that would be very satisfying for a show that, was incomplete. And last but not least, I started the Dungeon of Black Company. I've seen 2 episodes of it, and it's pretty funny. So the first episode made me a little unsure, not because it wasn't funny, but because, while it was funny, it's hard to say if it was going to be kind of too mean-spirited. But episode 2 has proved to be pretty promising. It threw some very unexpected curveballs and sources of humor that actually produced giggles, so I'm probably going to still give it some shot since I don't know what I'm going to watch next anyways. There's probably stuff on the list. But it's definitely worth considering. As for the stuff that's airing that I'm keeping up on, Life with an Ordinary Guy Who Reincarnated as a Fantasy Knockout. What happened in this previous episode? Yeah, that stuff. Still funny. I do kind of feel like at this point I'm feeling a little more like I need it to decide where it's going. It doesn't feel like it's not going anywhere. It doesn't feel like the comedy is actually lessening, but it is one of those things where I do wonder where it's going. It doesn't feel like it's standing still. Again, I guess that's just my general thought on some of the stuff there. There were funny things that happened in there. Next up, In the Land of Leedale, episode 10. Let's see, we had that, and what else? I think Land of Leedale is also in a similar place, and both of those series are reaching, if they're only a single core, then they're reaching kind of close to wherever the single core is going to end. And Leedale feels like it could be setting up something that it's building up to, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's actually building up to something. Like, they're continuing to explore a concept that's been brought up in the past couple of episodes, and that's just giving some interesting stuff. Again, one of the pluses of Leedale, and of course with Reincarnated as a Fantasy Knockout, is they don't fall back on stale patterns that the show's in. So, they shake up the social group who they're talking to, the intended meaning of some of their conversation, and they keep the audience engaged by, not saying, oh yes, we're just going to tell this joke over and over again because that's what people expect. And in My Dress Up Darling, episode 10, good continuation of the previous episode. I feel like maybe some stuff sort of happened here that's indicating it leaning somewhere. It's interesting because the pacing feels a little bit quicker in respect to what you kind of expect to be happening in the show, but also, not too fast. I don't know how to explain it without kind of spoiling stuff that I don't know if I want to spoil. But I know the general feeling I have is that where it is right now, I guess I'm waiting for it to see what it's about to do as this core is coming close to an end. So it's kind of similar to the previous 2 episodes, or previous 2 anime that I just talked about. Alright, what else is there to talk about? I guess Dead by Daylight, still playing a good amount of that. Didn't get a lot done today because, headache kind of means that I only had so much energy to actually play. So I just did my 2 dailies, and, it's not like I'm good enough to necessarily get those dailies, but it was very nice that, I had a team of survivors that kind of realized, I wasn't being too lethal, and they gave me a couple of helpful things. After I took care of the basic chasing everybody down and hooking them once, blight stuff. But I guess the most interesting thing for this past week is to talk about the new killer, Sadako from The Ring. Now, if you hear that and you think of, oh, did you mean Samara? Well, no. Samara is from the US version of the ring, and I think I've talked before about how American versus Japanese version of ring, there's trade-offs for both of them. Can't be things that are off about both, and there's really, I think there's going to be a lot of preference weighed towards probably whatever you saw first. Assuming that you actually enjoyed whatever you saw first. You know, so those tropes could be tropes that you really don't like. Like, American version would have, oh, yeah, you introduced another creepy little kid. You only needed one of them. Did you know that show? And the Japanese version is, okay, so a lot of people have psychic powers, and it in my opinion, you know, something like that just makes the effect of the existence of these psychic powers on Sadako to feel less creepy and something about her being a monster, and also a little convenient for the storytelling. And those are trade-offs. Again, I think people will probably prefer one versus the other for very different reasons. But the killer in Dead by Daylight is Sadako from the Japanese version. And so that means that not only is she not a little kid, but she's Japanese, so she's small, like she could be a tall little kid, but she's a grown woman who just is one of the shortest killers. I haven't played against her enough to really say a whole lot of definitive things, I guess. But I think a lot of other people have, and I think the general consensus is she's really good at making a Dead by Daylight unnerving and scary for people. And she wouldn't be the only killer to be able to do that, but other ones tend to be a little more gimmicky, whereas Sadako is kind of that way in her base set. Now, not necessarily if you don't know what you're doing with her, but if you do, people kind of are always guessing where she's coming from. She's harder to keep track of. And she's sneaky. She's not the sneakiest stealth killer out there, but she's just sneaky enough that those two things combined together can leave people feeling worried, unsure, uncertain. And I want to play as her some more, but right now my loadout is very weird for her. Partially because I started unlocking a lot of perks, but I'm not going to unlock all of them on her until I Prestige 3 her, and I'm not going to do that until I've unlocked all the perks, which I'm going to be doing for all the killers, and then eventually target one at a time to Prestige and then to fully get all the perks on. I think I've mentioned this plan before, and Sadako coming out, I've finally gotten past the point where she's level 50, and she's actually got an okay set. She doesn't have the perfect one I would want for what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make her into a bruiser, basically, because I really like her animations. So I've got brutal strength, so she breaks those crates and smashes generators faster. That's really cool. I wanted fire up because that could also speed that up even more. And that would also combo well with bamboozle, which causes her to crawl through windows faster. And I wanted some of that creepiness. But unfortunately, I only had bamboozle and brutal strength. Let's see. I was gonna say, obviously, I would put barbecue chili on her, but I don't have that. But I do have her one perk that combos well with the fact that I love to just destroy generators, and that's the one that also makes it where if people are unsure and they don't hop back on that generator, it regresses really fast. And then finally, agitation. Just it's a little more bruisery, but you know, it's kind of fun. She bam hits hard with her psychic powers. It's kind of fun. I've wanted to play her a bit, but I've also been holding back because I get the impression a lot of people are playing as her. So I'm trying to give breaks and do other stuff. Fun things, fun things. I don't know if I have much to say about Yoichi other than it is hilarious how empathetic connection combined with Object of Obsession has managed to break the game so much that they actually had to turn Object of Obsession off. It's surprising. Basically, it's my understanding that if you have both those perks combined, then when the killer hits another survivor, that survivor crashes. Something about the combination of empathetic connection trying to turn on while Object of Obsession is on that survivor. Very strange. And then, you know, before that, there's a perk for Quentin called Wake Up that was also turned off because if any survivor had that and any survivor in the match then tried to interact with a exit gate switch, the killer would crash. It's kind of impressive that you would have that level of crashing in, yeah, that's pretty crazy. But that's the state of things, and the truth of the matter is it's all complicated enough that I'm not sure that I could say that I'd be able to necessarily make it work well myself. So I'm not complaining at behavior for being unable to keep up on it. I kind of understand some of this stuff sounds like it would just be really fucking hard to code. Nurse is a really good example of that. But I digress. Alright. Even though I think I got lucky today, I was maybe going to do a cooking video, but I didn't want to do a cooking video, so at least I had an anime to show y'all. I'm pretty sure I have something showing up for next week. If I don't, I'll probably try and do a cooking video. I really don't want to, just because I'm not quite getting things quite right to make those videos. But all that aside, yeah, that's all my updates for this week. Y'all have a nice one.